All realist artists know, or at least understand to some degree, that a basic knowledge of Euclidean geometry is essential to creating convincing images, even if they only use it intuitively. The term aerial perspective is used to describe the illusion of depth in two-dimensional work. There's an interesting geometric phenomenon which helps to demonstrate how it works, and I touched on this in video number 7, Defining Spaces. Many believe it has some sacred meaning and refer to it as sacred geometry, but what they're really referring to is the Platonic solids, which is only one of the mathematical ways of defining spaces. And both Euclid and later Fibonacci based their mathematical calculations on natural phenomena. But this particular pattern, which I'm going to share for those who don't know it already, results in what is commonly called Metatron's cube, and I want to explain why it is an illusion that really doesn't work two-dimensionally, because it alludes to a three-dimensional space. Now let's go through the basic steps of creating Metatron's cube, and then I'll explain why it's an inaccurate representation. To create the basic grid, we begin with 5 circles of the same circumference. Because they are equal in size, then the centres of the circles are equidistant, as they will be with any adjacent circles. And if we add more, then all the centres are equidistant. And incidentally, if 3 or more circles are placed so they overlap one another, with the crossing points where the circles touch, followed by another 3, the result is the so-called tree of life. The tree of life is simply a geometric shape held by many cultures to be symbolic of the physical and spiritual life process, and it's a very pleasing shape, but it is only two-dimensional since it can't occur in the three-dimensional world, because if the circles were actually spheres, they'd look like this. And if the 6 coloured circles were added, they would sit in front of one another. There would not actually be a crossover. The only natural way spheres can lock together is like this, that is, if the grey circles were adhered to the spot to prevent them moving, or in a grid. There's no mystery to the tree of life formation, but it is a compelling and attractive symbol, and we find meaning where and when we need to, and I like to use it too. And it's been used by many cultures to create the most wonderful artwork, so I'm not denigrating it in the least, but I'm talking about the geometry of visual phenomena on a two-dimensional space now, so this is what it's about. But I mention it because the same thing applies to the Metatron cube, which is created by adding more circles. So here we have a total of 13. And by joining the centres of every circle to every other circle, beginning with the centre 6 circles and ending with the outer circles, we end up with a grid. You could keep adding circles into infinity and have a crossover of these patterns, which somehow leaves us with a sense that this could be the foundation of our physical and energetic world. But let's stay with the 13 circles. Now, it's probably obvious that some of the lines form a quadrilateral shape made up of 2 triangles. And below that, 2 more. And then on the left side, 2 more, thus creating the illusion of a cube. If the next set of triangles are added, we find a larger shape. And the concept continues infinitely, depending on how many circles are added to the grid. For adherence to so-called sacred geometry, it's supposed to symbolize underlying geometric patterns found in the universe, but those patterns can't exist on a flat surface. The only way to understand its significance is to see it three-dimensionally, and to see things three-dimensionally, one on paper must create an illusion using 2 dimensions. So we're imagining a three-dimensional shape where it can't exist on a flat surface, and because there's no object in the whole world that is two-dimensional, even a piece of very thin paper is a three-dimensional object, It can only be reproduced on paper by creating the illusion of depth, and that requires a vanishing point. If it didn't have a third dimension, it couldn't exist. And to see the secrets of the universe in 2 dimensions is impossible. The universe exists in a minimum of 3 dimensions, or none. So there's a reason I'm taking you through this journey, and it's just to recognize how we create the illusion of reality in 3 dimensions on a flat surface. If the cube is isolated from the grid, it looks like this. Let's imagine the cube represents a building, and we'll take the lower edge at the point at which it sits on the ground. Then, if the direction of the base is extended backwards on both visible sides, and we create an horizon like this, then imagine the same cube to the point of the horizon in either direction. It would be so small we could probably not even see it, but it would still be there. And the roof line of the building would have to be running along a sight line to where it would exist on the horizon as well. That changes the shape of the cube entirely. So now it would look like this. So let's remove the sight lines, and we still perceive it as a cubic shape, but not of the same dimensions. If the exercise is repeated with a low horizon line, then this would happen. The roof has disappeared, just as it would if we were lower to the ground. We can't see the tops of buildings from ground level. If we go back to the more distant horizon, but this time extend the roof line to the horizon rather than the ground line, it would take on a different shape again, because now we're looking down on the roof from a higher perspective. Now let's do a fourth one, but this time extending the back edges of the roof. So now the shape is entirely different. So now we have the 5 shapes together, the original cuboid on the left, which is the Metatron shape, and the 4 we've created. You'll notice that the vertical line where the 2 front sides meet is exactly the same in all 4 of them, but they're so different in shape because of aerial perspective. The lower front shape is repeated in the second, and in the third one, then the front roof line is repeated in this one, and the back roof line repeated in this one. So most professional artists probably have a practiced eye and don't need to go through the process we just went through, but it's a fascinating exercise to play with, I think, and I hope you'll join me next time.